Good evening, everyone. It is 4:59. Still waiting on a few more people to join, and we'll get started. We got our chairman. Jamie, is the chief joining us this evening?
Sorry, couldn't find the mute button. She will not be with us tonight.
Okay, good to know. All right, it is 5 p.m. Good evening, everybody. Just a couple of quick reminders. This is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube right now. Please mute yourself if you are not speaking. And when you would like to speak, please raise your hand. You can find that in the participants tab. And it looks like everybody's got their names set up. So turn it over to you, Jimmy.
Okay, good evening. Kim, can you see me?
No, your camera's not on.
Oh, goodness. Hold on a second. I'm having a few technical difficulties, but we'll go forward. Can you bear with me just a moment? I know we're recording, and I'm trying to get onto two different cameras as we go forward. So I may stop for a moment, folks. I'm sorry, while I get myself together here, because my other technology is trying to connect, and this current one isn't acting right. Okay, so I'm going to leave off this one and go on to the next one.
Hey, Kim. This is Liz. Well, Jimmy is getting his technology squared away. Could I just embarrass Emilio for a minute and recognize that he was named Tigard Youth Volunteer of the Year by the Chamber of Commerce? So I wanted to give him a public shout out for that. Good job, kudos, way to go. You're amazing. I don't know how you do it all. So while we had a minute, I just wanted to acknowledge Emilio for that. So
yes,
thank you.
Actually, on that note, first of all, thank you. I do enjoy volunteering with Tigard. And while we also have a minute, I would just like to make it very public that the Youth City Councilor position is open for applications right now. We don't have applicants and we need them. So if you know any high schoolers who are going to be a junior or senior next year, definitely tell them to go on Tigard's website or reach out to me. I can help them apply. It's a really quick application. To be perfectly clear, I applied like the night before it was due, so it really does not take that long, but it's a great opportunity. So if you guys know any high schoolers, let them know. It's been such a great experience, and you might win Youth Volunteer of the Year. So, you know, it's just great overall.
And you don't have to go to a Tigard high school. You just need to live in Tigard. So you can go to a public, private, any school, but you just need to be live in Tigard. So, or homeschool.
Well, congratulations, Emilio. And again, my apologies for my technical difficulties, but I am live and in living color. So Kim, thank you so much for starting us off. And I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 5:03 p.m. on April 26th, 2021. So, my cleansing breath. If you all would join me in a much needed centering exercise, as my body is still racing, trying to get myself together. I'd like to read a statement first, and then you can all join me in a breathing exercise to bring focus and thoughtfulness to our conversations this evening. Okay. You can turn your cameras off if you would like for this part of the meeting. I'd like you to be Joining with me tonight in centering our conversations, I want to read this statement. It will allow us to have a breathing exercise and focus and bring thoughtfulness to tonight's discussion. Today, we convene to listen and learn from each other through reflection and discussion. As we reevaluate and improve our public safety practices, we elevate the voices and experiences of the communities who have been and continue to be disproportionately impacted by inequitable systems. We thank all those who have advocated and worked on dismantling injustices in Tigard and our broader community. We build off their efforts to create more equitable and just outcomes for people of all backgrounds and abilities. The purpose of our meetings is to develop our understanding of current public safety structures, practices, and procedures, identify and eliminate institutional racism within Tigard's public institutions by centering equity and racial justice. We will bring forward the concerns and experiences of ourselves and our community. We will bring recommendations to city leadership to improve the lived experience of all people in Tigard. As we begin our breathing exercise, please close your eyes or gaze softly downward. Feel the chair under your legs. Breathe in deeply through your nose and out your mouth. Feel your hands in your lap. Breathe in deeply through your nose and out your mouth. Feel your feet on the ground. Breathe in deeply through your nose and out your mouth. Slowly open your eyes and begin to breathe normally. Thank you all for participating and creating space with me. It certainly helps me to gather myself and be fully available and connected in tonight's meeting. And Kim, can you begin with the roll call tonight? Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Commander McDonald?
Here.
Officer Nunn?
I'm here.
Delby Rahala?
Here.
Michael O'Brien?
Here.
Abdi will not be joining us this evening. Emilio Calderon?
Here.
Liz Newton?
Here.
John Trin?
Present.
Jimmy Brown?
Present.
Lee Landers?
Here.
Hattie Lofgren?
I'm here.
Justin Lowe?
I'm present.
Danny Rauda?
Here.
Valerie Sasaki?
Here.
Sean Stoldryer?
Here.
John Gearhart is still on his leave of absence. And Jeff Mott?
Here.
Great. Completed the roll call. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Kim. As I understand it, we have no public comment tonight. Is there any written comment from the community tonight?
Mr. Chair, no written comment or requests to speak were submitted for this meeting.
Okay, thank you. So we have no community members having joined us either to speak or provide us with any written comment. For those who are of the public and are viewing in this evening, I would like to welcome any community feedback on the work that our committee is doing. If you have any comments and would like to have them presented to us in writing, all testimony must be submitted by 4:30 p.m. the day of the scheduled meeting. And if you would like to speak at our meeting, please email our staff, eduardo@tigard-oregon.gov. Additional details and instructions are available at tigard-oregon.gov/PSAB. So with that, at the end of our last meeting, which I must say was rather robust in our discussion, we were unable to connect with the board's opportunities and abilities to discuss current events and how they impact the Tigard community. And as a result, I've asked if we can have space to do that at this point of the meeting, rather than holding it at the latter part of the meeting. This gives us an opportunity to, one, value the voices that we as PSAB members have, and to represent the voices of our community members as well. And so with that, I would like to open it up to any of our members that would like to reflect upon the current events that have come through, either through last week or through this week. And feel free to raise your hand, and Kim will make sure that you get an opportunity to speak. Thank you.
I'm trying to find it on here to raise my hand.
It's in the participants tab in the bottom, and then there's the raise hand, but you are the first. Yep, there it is.
All right. So I just wanted to talk about my personal experience. So here at the colonies where I reside, there's myself, and there's quite a bit of other people that are having ongoing co-compliance issues that are going on with this building. And I first want to say that I love everything about the city of Tigard. I love the people in Tigard. I love the police department in Tigard. Everybody's awesome. But this alone issue is making me want to move because I don't want to deal with it anymore. We have foundation issues at our place. We have water issues at our place. We have holes in our walls. We have cracks that are going in and out. We have black mold that is growing in our windowsills and in the corners of our house that we have to live in because our management company comes in and does a little evaluation. They take a picture of it and they go, oh, that's just black mold. And we haven't heard anything in 2 to 3 weeks about them coming over and taking care of this issue. It's causing a health issue. My wife and myself has had an appointment with our doctor to get stuff going on and countermeasures so we can counteract what issues that we're having, that we cough, we sneeze, nausea every time we're at home. This is a place that we call home. We're supposed to be comfortable in our home. Whenever we leave our home, we're comfortable. When we come back home, it's ridiculous. We all have had hard shares. We start off in like the shelter, Good Neighbor Center. And then we get put into places like this to up ourselves, to help us get more acclimated into getting back to normal. But when we get put into a place like this, that does nothing but put us down because we get no response from management. The people who come and do maintenance are undocumented workers that have no licenses in any work that they do. It's almost like they do it on purpose because it's job security. They know it's going to break again. They're going to come back and fix it. This is an issue that's been going on. And because the colonies is in the city of Tigard, it's ran by Washington County, but something needs to happen with this place. It's not just me. The city council has gotten letters, the mayor, we've been in cohorts with him. There's a lot of stuff that's going on here that's beyond even what I'm saying right now. So that's my personal lived experience in the city of Tigard. I'm trying my hardest to want to stay here and not want to move out of here, but something needs to happen because everything else besides this living situation is very awesome and the best place that I've ever lived in the whole state of Oregon in my lifetime. So that's my experience, and I hope something can come of this. It's an issue. We're looked down here as like the slum of Tigard. Hey, we get up every day, we go to work, we pay our bills. They had enough nerve to raise up our rent. right in the middle of a COVID crisis where a lot of us lost hours at work, and they went ahead and did that and was threatening people to kick them out if they didn't pay. There's just a whole bunch of stuff that's going on here that needs to change, period. So that's that.
I'm very sorry you're going through that, Lee. Thank you for sharing with the group.
Yeah, no problem, no problem.
Yes, Liz.
I just want to respond to Lee. I've been looped in, and I think some of our staff has, on the emails that have been going through to Mayor Snyder on this issue, and I know he has reached out. I am going to reach out again to the mayor and see where we are on some of the specifics that you note, because you say that you said that there's been some contact and you hadn't heard back from 2 or 3 weeks. That concerns me very much. So I'm not making commitments for anyone here, but I am committing to reach out to the mayor to see, and I know City Attorney Shelby's listening and Edward is on the line as well. The mayor may be watching on YouTube, but I will reach out and see where we are. And I think I can get your email, Lee, and I will reach back out to you and let you know where we are, because I am apprised of the conditions there and the situation going on, and I have seen the emails. So I will commit to following up and see if we can get a more current status report. And I'm sorry for that situation. Thanks for being willing to share that with us. Thanks.
It's okay. We're all in the city of Tigard. It's worth sharing. This is a living, breathing situation that's going on. So no harm here.
Thank you for looking into that, Liz. And John Trin.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie, for allowing the space to make a comment. First of all, I want to mention that while the verdict of the murder of George Floyd symbolized some measure of progress towards racial equity and accountability, it doesn't fully erase our nation history of systemic and institutional racism. The verdict sparked a great deal of emotion for many of us. And I feel that justice has been finally served, yet it doesn't end the grief felt by so many. We still have a long way to go in our fight for racial justice in this country, and I'm committed to the work. And together we must remain thoughtful, determined in addressing this reality, including the unacceptable abuse of authority and the power and pain it causes, disproportionately for Black community and people of color. So thank you for allowing me to comment on my feeling of what happened this past couple weeks.
Thank you for sharing, John. Valerie?
So just to add to what John was saying, I did read the statement that the police chiefs and sheriff of Washington County put out after the verdict in Derek Chauvin's case. And I think the emphasis on accountability was really well placed, both in, what John just said, and then in the statement that came out. I mean, I think the question that is part of our mandate here is the justice component of it. What is just? What can we do to move the needle towards a more just system, and a system where one of the things that really troubled me, and part of the reason that I did not watch the trial, was because the defense tactics were very focused on victim blaming, rather than the question of whether, what actually happened for the 9 minutes plus that led to Mr. Floyd's death. And, I think some of the discussions that we've been having here have been very helpful for me in clarifying my feelings on how we can take proactive steps towards justice. And so it was very emotional. It still is very emotional, particularly in light of, some of the events immediately after the release of the verdict, right? You should be able to call the police and not get shot, for example. So we have a long way to go, but I think the public step towards accountability, I think, is very significant. And I think we are it's good for us to recognize that. And so I appreciated the statement that Eduardo circulated to us and that the police chiefs and sheriff issued after the verdict.
Thank you, Valerie. Justin Lowe.
Thank you. And thank you for creating the space today to have this conversation in the beginning part of our meeting today. I wanted to touch on something that Valerie had mentioned, which is connected to a conversation I've had with some of our community members in relation to our meetings and the things that we've discussed recently. And I too had a very hard time watching parts of the trial, and I think it is because not only the emphasis of victim blaming by the defense, but because of the overwhelming video in and of itself and what it conveyed. And one of the things that I was reading from the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, and a couple other folks, and what I've been conversing about with community members was the concept of that video and it serving as proof, but that was the main point of what the trial was based on. And I thought back to what we had just done in a few meetings ago about our body cams here in Tigard. And on one hand, very grateful of the opportunity and conversation we had around body cams, but also I remember something that stuck out that community members ended up approaching me on, which was that there was a comment I believe that was made where we discussed that police officers and anyone that they're engaging with become more cognizant of the situation and maybe more compliant or cautious because of the presence of a body cam. And I think this correlates well with the conversation we're having later today about what do we look in a potential Tigard police officer, because I think that on one hand, although that is great that the body cams provide that cautiousness, I don't believe that that should be leaned on as a crutch, and that shouldn't be the sole basis of why an officer is cautious in engaging or why de-escalation happens only because of the presence of a body cam. And so I just wanted to bring that forward today because I think it's very, it relates well to the recent trial of Derek Chauvin, as well as the work that we are doing and how we can proceed forward when we start addressing the body cam policies in our later conversations, and also later today when we talk about what we look forward in a potential Tigard police officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. And Jimmy?
Yes, thank you all for your conversation. Clearly the verdict in the last week was impactful to all of us. And Lee, I feel you as it relates to your situation, in your current living arrangement. And I do believe that Liz will do all that she can to work with the mayor and any other city department and potentially Washington County to see that your issues are addressed. I did some reading over the past week or so, just kind of surfing around, looking at things, and got into some conversations with friends about the robust defense that was offered up by Chauvin's attorneys. And I certainly have mixed feelings about it. I agree that there was a lot of victim blaming, which we knew would happen, which started pretty much right after the autopsy reveals that there were certain substances in his bloodstream that may have impacted his breathing abilities. But I also am struck by the issue of the national issue of the death of people of color at the hands of police officers in something so mundane as a traffic stop. I was reading some research that really delved into the issue of traffic stop and traffic stop violence against police officers, and the traffic stop violence nationally, as reported by this particular study, is very, very low. That police officers suffer violence at the hands of a traffic stop. And yet we continue to see people of color, especially African-American men, being killed in a simple traffic stop. Whether it be because someone has an outstanding warrant, or whether there's an accusation that someone has left the scene of something, the fact that a traffic stop leads to the death of an individual is, to me, very disturbing. It calls for, at least in this particular article, it calls for a new look at how traffic stops are handled by police departments nationally. And that perhaps, as one suggestion, that traffic stops not be implemented by police officers, but some other means of utilizing public safety staff to conduct traffic stops in varying jurisdictions. I'm going to try and find that information and share that with Eduardo, and certainly he then can share it with the PSAB as well, because it really pointed out to me the fact that when a person has been killed as a result of a traffic stop, some of the first lines of defense have been that, you know, the traffic stop is the most dangerous stop that a police officer can face. And that those are words that are generally brought forward as officers are heading out into patrol. I myself, in my own professional history, spent many nights working with different law enforcement programs throughout the country, and especially in the metropolitan area. And it always struck me to hear before officers came back or went out on patrol, you know, to one, be safe, two, we want you to come back alive. And that was the parting information before they went out on patrol. And I still get the feeling that that's also what people who are living their life in the community have to say too when they go out in the evening. Be safe. I want you to come back alive. And that gives a certain attitudinal piece that one has to be aware of as they go out either on patrol or out into their community. I personally believe that I have as much right to come back alive as any police officer, and that anybody in the community has the right to expect that if they go out into the community, maybe they have some paper on them, maybe they might have a history on them, that they should be able to come back alive as well. So it, to me, impacts the work that we do as the PSAB, because I think we want to look at those kinds of situations. We want to look at the kind of messaging that occurs when an officer gets ready to go out on patrol. What are the words that we're saying to them? And do those words produce a potential space where overcautious behavior can lead to a negative impact with a member of the community? So that's kind of where I'm at. You know, I want to thank Kim and Eduardo for allowing us to have this space. You know, we all have things that we go through as we sit here in the PSAB and beyond. So being able to speak in a safe environment like this is, to me, very, very much appreciated.
Thank you, Jimmy, for sharing, and thank you for reading my mind. I definitely want to read that article, so if you wouldn't mind digging it up and sending it to Eduardo to distribute, that would be wonderful. And Sean, I see your hand.
I thought the statement by the Washington County Sheriffs was really good. Good message from the local law enforcement community. The trial was hard to watch, and I just thought it was interesting, the piece about accountability. For me, watching the trial, the outcome of the trial, I didn't feel like we ever really got true answers on all the systemic national issues that were at play that put that situation, to happen in the first place. And I don't know if if that deep dive into root cause issues nationally will ever truly happen. The trial may close with, one person being held accountable, but to me, it just seems like it goes so much deeper than that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And I think you're dead on. That's why we're meeting here today. And Liz, I see your hand.
Well, as you can tell, I represent a different demographic. I'm 68 and I've lived in Tigard for a long time. And what I wanted to share with the group is this is the first time people in my age group, people I know that are in the same demographic as me, paid so much attention to this, and it mattered to them. The result mattered to them. A lot of relief from the people that I know that the verdict was what it was. And a lot of people that I know that live in this community are concerned about accountability. They respect our police department, but it was just striking to me, and I was grateful how many of them, for the first time in my life, really paid attention. And it was important to them that there was accountability. And a lot of them watched a lot of that trial, and they were very concerned about the approach that the defense took. And, so I just wanted to share that with the group. I had not seen that before, how many people that are like me in the community paid attention. It mattered to them. It still does matter to them. So that was heartening to me as a community member, because I think they're interested in a positive change. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you, Liz. And Patty, I see your hand.
I just want to say it has been a very emotional last 6 weeks. I mean, the trial, the number of individuals that have been shot, particularly Black individuals, children, even in traffic stops, et cetera, et cetera. It's devastating that it's continuing to happen. And I have to say that I've had one comfort that's been huge during this period of time, and that's the establishment of this Public Safety Advisory Board. The fact that months ago, the city of Tigard established this board and gave us the goals that we have, it just seems so incredibly important at this time. And it's such an honor to be a part of this group. But I have to say that the fact that we're being proactive in this community, it means very much to me, very much to me. So thank us all.
Thank you, Patty. And thank you, everybody, for giving up your Monday nights every 2 weeks and the time in between meetings to prepare. It's pretty amazing. Emilio.
Yeah, what everyone else said, I completely agree with. And I just wanted to go off what Patty just said about the PSAB, because I hope that this is truly going to be a successful model that other local cities can replicate, and hopefully maybe even broader than that, because I really do think that we're going to make change in the city of Tigard. And I think that nationally, our nation is getting ready to move towards these more positive changes. And while one person may be being held accountable, there's still an entire system that needs to be held accountable, and many other individuals who have also perpetrated very similar crimes. So it's the start, but there's a long road ahead of us.
Thank you, Emilio. Would anyone else like to share this evening about how current events are impacting them or the Tigard community? Jimmy, I see no other hands.
Okay. Again, I want to thank all of you who reflected on the events currently, the events that followed as a result of the trial, the work that we do as a PSAB and the impact that it can have in the Tigard community. Emilio, I want to share as well that I think we have a model with the PSAB that could be replicated throughout the local environment. I know Tigard is different of its demographic makeup and its size makeup, but the process of giving community members an opportunity to connect with local law enforcement, the police department, the city system, and as well to have them connect with us in an open and transparent manner, I do believe bodes well for those communities that would be interested in trying to put together something similar as we have here. You know, the whole connection with the law enforcement community is to, I believe, to create a better understanding and a broader understanding of what public safety means. Public safety is more than just law enforcement. Public safety encompasses the entire breadth of our ability to live safely in our communities. That's what we expect. That's what the city and the department should expect, that folks want to be able to be safe. And that's safe from inequitable treatment, that is safe from harms that are present in communities, and that we want to be able to be viewed by the police as not a threat, but as people who want to enjoy and maintain their lived experience in this community. So, as I look at our agenda, we are moving to police chief's update. And as I understand it, the chief is not available this evening. Is that right?
The chief is not available, but Commander McDonald will give the update in her stead.
Okay. All righty. Thank you.
Go ahead, Commander.
All right. Thanks, Jimmy. So I'll give a few things the chief asked me to update the board on. Quickly on our officer involved shooting, there still is no additional info from the district attorney's office. So we're still waiting to hear on that. You may have seen an article that was done in some of the media outlets that where they spoke with the family of Jacob McDuff, and there was a tort filed with the city, which is, and Shelby could expand on that if I do this wrong, but basically it preserves the Mr. McDuff's estate with the ability to file a lawsuit if they choose to within a period of time. And I won't profess to know what those are, but we still await the district attorney's information. So once that becomes available, then we'll clearly bring that to this group as well as to the wider community. Are there any questions about that I may or may not have the answer to? I'm happy to try if anybody has a question.
Yes, Valerie does.
Valerie, yeah.
Hi. So, you know, we're here, it's almost May. And it just seems, I know that when the incident, the officer involved shooting happened, you know, they said it could be as long as 6 months before the crime lab was able to process everything. Has there been any update? I know this is a question that I've been getting from folks, as far as a timeline update on when we might have more information about that.
I wish we had that answer.
I'm sure. Okay. Well, I just thought I would ask the question
We
since
just don't
we're
know at this
coming up on the time.
Yep. I just don't know. The chief asks regularly, probably weekly. I imagine the district attorney is probably tired of her asking. So, but she does. She communicates with him regularly. So.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. And Jimmy has a question as well.
Sure.
Thanks, Commander. I was again asked by one of my cohorts out here in the community about a report that he had read relative to this particular case. And he indicated that he read that the officer who was involved in this shooting had resigned. Is that something that was reported, or is that something that's out there? I hadn't read anything about it. I hadn't checked the local news media to see if that was in fact something that had happened. And I'm not sure it's a personnel issue, and maybe you can't report on it as well. But
yeah, no, I can't. I can tell you he did resign. He took a job at another law enforcement agency, which that was something that was in process actually for quite some time before the incident occurred. So, but yes, he resigned back, I think on the 15th is when he left.
Thank you. And I don't see any other hands.
Okay, a couple other things. So the chief talked a little bit about it at the budget meeting on Saturday, but one of the things that she and the chiefs from Tualatin and Sherwood are working on is trying to put together what would be a South Cities or a South end of the county mental health response team that would be attached to Washington County's team. Part of the reason for that is although that service is available to us, oftentimes it is not available when we need it. And by partnering with Tualatin and Sherwood and using this teamwork down here, that it would give us a better chance of having team members available when we need them. For example, so it was yesterday, we received many calls on a person that was experiencing a mental health crisis here in town. And sometimes we will respond, sometimes we don't, based on the information that we have, based on if the person is a threat to themselves or others, then yes, we're going to respond. But if it's someone that is not a threat, then we try to gather some other resources like the crisis team or the mental health response team. The mental health response team was unavailable at the time. And then we ultimately ended up getting a call for service where she was running out into traffic. She had stripped off her clothing, ran out into traffic, and then ultimately we got her into protective custody to get her to the hospital for a mental health evaluation. Not before our officers were confronted quite aggressively by some community members about what we were doing and why we were dealing with a mental health call. But that just underscores the need for this type of service. There was nobody else to go to help this person. So that's one of the things that the chief talked to the budget committee about on this past Saturday. And we won't really know if it's going to be able to take off. We've found money in our budget for next fiscal year without having to ask for additional funds from the budget committee. But that isn't the case for Tualatin and Sherwood. They have to get it approved by their budget committees and their council. So we won't know whether or not this is going to be able to work until their budgets are approved. So, but it's a step in the right direction. It's something we've wanted to do for a very long time, but it's expensive, right? And it's challenging to be able to provide the appropriate resource where needed. And then another thing,
before we've got a couple questions about that last point.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Sean, go ahead.
Thank you. Officer McDonald, would this program for the crisis intervention, would that be similar to like Eugene's Cahoots program? Does the city know anything about that?
Yeah, we're familiar with it. It's different than what they have down there. So in Washington County, we have officers and deputies that are specially trained in crisis intervention, and they're partnered with a mental health clinician. So in the vast majority of cases, it's a master's level clinician. So they're actually employed by LifeWorks Northwest, who also runs the crisis team in Washington County. So these specially trained law enforcement officers, officers and deputies, work directly with a clinician. So it is different than the Cahoots model. So yeah, we're familiar with that out of the Eugene.
It seems problematic dealing with those situations because you need two skill sets. You need a good master clinician type, but you also need somebody that can handle things in case it turns violent. And I understand those kinds of calls are very difficult. I guess my concern is I think we need that, and from based on people I know in Eugene, police officers and community members, the program's been well received. Mm-hmm. I just wonder if the city shouldn't look at other funding sources. I think it's a worthwhile program, but yet, and if my math is correct, the national average is 200. I mean, for the national average of 2.2 police officers per 1,000. I mean, Tigard should have 117 police officers, and I think we have 70 plus another 9 coming is 79. So anyways, I just think there's a big picture, and I'm coming into this group late, and maybe all these conversations have taken place, but it just seems like there's a big picture need here to evaluate.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And you're right, it does take a different skill set, which is one of the reasons why the officers and deputies that are selected to work with these clinicians, they have very specific higher level training for dealing with people in crisis. So they can be more effective in assisting that clinician. And then they also get a bunch of follow-up cases. It isn't always just responding to people that are in immediate crisis situations. It's helping to create wraparound services and identify wraparound services for these people that are experiencing this severe and persistent mental illness, right? To be able to try and get them into those positions where they can get connected with organizations like John Trin's, where they can provide long, ongoing wraparound services, not just the mental health services, but making sure that they have housing, making sure that they have access to just regular medical care in addition to mental health care, because we know that balance of what people need in their life really helps to create that safe balance that they need in order to get their lives back on track. I mean, mental illness it's an illness. It's a medical problem. It's not a criminal problem. And so until we as a society can learn to get beyond that part, this is a societal issue that we need to address as a society, and finding the appropriate level of resources to assist people in those areas. And it's a significant challenge.
It's a function of where we're at as a community and as a state in nutrition, jobs, education, wages. I mean, it's an economy. It's its own system.
It is for sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Commander. And I've got a question from Justin Lowe. Sorry.
Justin.
No worries. Thank you, Commander McDonald. I have a handful of quick questions here regarding this. The first is, I'm going to come at this from a different perspective, where I am more in favor of the cahoots model. I guess I'm curious as to what are the reasons that you, your department and also the counties as a whole decides to pair up a law enforcement officer with a mental health clinician rather than just leaving it to a nonprofit or a clinician by themselves. I mean, I understand the personal safety part, but I guess I'd like to delve in a little further since in Eugene, they do not necessarily do that all the time.
Yeah, I guess probably the biggest one, Justin, is the outcomes that we've seen here. We see really solid outcomes in Washington County when the mental health response team has been involved. And so we find that the ability to do that, that follow-up piece. So rather than just that initial response piece, but the follow-up piece, which is probably even more critical than the initial response piece. Most of the time, that's the case. The making sure that you get that is really the critical part. And so what we've found in Washington County is that team, the teamwork of the mental health response team, so the deputy or the officer and the clinician, they have that bandwidth and they have that resource pool that they're able to use. Now, whether or not it's better or equal to cahoots, I'm not sure, but we have a solid program and a solid model that's working. And we're trying to build off of that. Now, that doesn't mean that we couldn't come up with something to augment the program that we currently have and that's similar to cahoots, which is a conversation that has occurred in the past. I mean, even a couple of years ago, we were having this conversation, even before a lot of the light over the last year that's been shown on this. It's a continual conversation that we have at the executive level here in Washington County, and trying to improve it is always part of the conversation. But then again, it always gets back down to funding. How do we pay for it? And I mean, that's the unfortunate reality of these programs is they're not inexpensive to run, and you have to be able to figure out a way to fund them. Now, there are some grants that are becoming available that may help with some things like that all of the agencies in Washington County are exploring. But again, it comes down to, can we improve the program we currently have, and how deep is that bucket of money that we have or that we need in order to get that job done?
Thank you very much for that response. That was actually incredibly helpful in contextualizing this conversation. And I'm glad to hear that this has already been in the works at higher levels and up to the county. I think that this is a larger conversation that could honestly take up way more time than we're allotted, but I would actually love if there's interest within this group to actually put a pin on this and revisit this in the future, because I think that's a wonderful thing that the commander just mentioned, that this is an ongoing conversation to want to improve this program. The last question that I have that's really quick is that you mentioned you are doing this South Washington County sort of coalition with Sherwood and Tualatin because you have found that in previous instances, there's not always an immediate response team available. And I was just curious, since Tualatin, Tigard, and Sherwood is still sizable amount of distance and area, if you all find that will be effective for your response times.
It's a great place to start. Yeah. It's better than what we have, and it's a great start. So the great thing is then if you have an officer and a clinician that are working, which it's really only going to be 40 hours a week, right? But if you have them working and there's a method to the madness, right? We try and allocate that resource during times that would be more likely to see those types of calls, and we use data for that. So we'll try and target those specific times, and 40 hours is 40 hours more than what we currently have a week. So it would be a definite improvement.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Justin, for noting that this is something that we should come back to. In our social justice unit, we also have it flagged to talk about mental health response in coordination with the police. So I'm sure the commander is taking notes, as am I, and we will get back to it in our schedule. And Valerie, I see your hand.
Yeah, so I just wanted to reiterate my support for Justin's comment about circling back to this, not just from a what processes are currently in place, but what is being talked about, as well as what what is the ideal that we should be striving for in this model. One of the things too that occurred to me when I was listening to the city council discussions, talking about the taser and body worn camera discussions, was it may be useful for some of our discussions to invite members of the budget committee to come participate in these discussions, where there is clearly a funding component. So I think it would only add to our ability to understand the issues better if we understood what some of the financial pressures were, as well as do we have an FTE that their job is to apply for this sort of grants? Because I think it's really important, and we really want to make sure that we're maximizing the reach in asking for whatever programs are available. So that was my only comment, but thank you, Commander, for your update.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Valerie. And Liz, I saw your hand go up when Valerie mentioned the budget committee. So I assume you got something to respond to that.
I do. Thank you, Kim. And when we talked about this at the budget committee last week, first of all, I want to thank Commander McDonald for bringing this forward, because we asked that the department bring this forward to let you all know what was being talked about. And I will just say two things really quickly. Number one, this is being viewed as an initial pilot program. We are aware that in order, the mayor even brought it up at the meeting, we would need to look for permanent funding. And I also wanted to let you know that there is funding in the budget for Public Safety Advisory Board recommendations. So the board does have some funding that's going to be made available down the road when we finalize the budget for recommendations of the board. So I concur. I think this is an important topic for this board to talk about. And we looked at it as a pilot program to start. And I think that's what the department's looking at too. It may be modified along the way, but yeah, just to let you know, there will be funding in the budget for recommendations of this board. And I think your idea, Valerie, of getting somebody on grants is a good idea too. But so thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And Jimmy, I see your hand.
Thank you. I just want to weigh in as well with all of those who have talked about the importance of having mental health capability. And Justin, it sounds like, as we look at what is happening in the legislative group, that this might be something that we could run up to one of our legislatures as to, what type of funding can the state look at relative to ensuring, as they look at police practices throughout the state, and the role that mental health, the lack of mental health services plays in how police interact with community members. Perhaps that's a discussion that can happen, in the legislative environment as well. And I know I would be happy, as well as I'm sure other members, to sit down and speak with any of the representatives who might want to move something through that can assist local departments in handling this beyond from the traditional law enforcement response. So thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you for volunteering. And Jeff, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. I also just wanted to voice my support for this discussion. I believe we have it spread across a couple different places in our official work plan, but at a high level, this idea of what should police officers be responsible for and what should other people or other groups be responsible for is probably the most important thing in my mind that we can work on as the Public Safety Advisory Board. Because, Jimmy, your comments around unarmed traffic patrol go hand in hand with unarmed mental health professionals, because we know if traffic stops, are, can be very deadly or proportionately more dangerous for Black males and people of color, people experiencing mental health issues, it becomes significantly more dangerous when interacting with police. So look forward to this lengthy discussion on kind of what do the police officers want to be responsible for? What do they feel that they're most best equipped to deal with? And how can we work to let them focus on those things and do their job while providing the services to the community through other people? So thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. And Lee, I see your hand.
Hello, Commander. Question for ya. So, the other day, we had a individual. My daughter was taking the dog out, and we were up here, and pretty much this individual followed my daughter up to our door, thought she was going to be home by herself, knocked on the door. My wife opens the door, and I'm standing right there, and he goes, "Oh, what kind of dog is that?" My wife, and then I, chest comes out, and I walk out, and I'm like, "What? What do you want to know about my dog? Who are you?" Oh, never mind. He was peeping my 12-year-old daughter and followed her up. But we also called non-emergency just to put that out there. And the officer called me back and was saying that she thinks she might know who this individual is. He might have a mental issue. So that whole officer, professional, mental health person, how are you guys going to respond to what these mentally ill people do? Does it depend on how you respond to it? Does it depend on if you let the clinician do his thing first and then you put him in custody or what have you? Do you put him in custody first and then let the mental health people deal with them? I mean, how does that happen? Because in my personal opinion, as a father, I don't care if he is mental. You are not going to follow my daughter like that up to my door with all the stuff going on over here. That's not happening. I don't care if you're mental or not. If you're mental, yes, you need to go get help. Yeah, I agree with that. But at the same time, that's something you don't do. That's something that I think swift response needs to happen. But unfortunately, when they showed up right away, that dude was gone. That lets me know that he really wasn't just looking to see what kind of dog I have, So in those situations, what would you guys do?
Well, so in a situation like that, I take it we did respond, and at least to the area to see if we could find the person that was identified. We're going to address criminal behavior or potential criminal behavior in the way that it should be appropriately. But it's a delicate balance when you have to make the determination as to how to address the mental health component with that. Washington County has a mental health court. So people that are arrested for that are diagnosed with a mental illness often are sent on a different route when they get into the court system. So it's a delicate balance is really how it works. We're going to respond to the call of criminal activity and attempt to identify what's going on and address that appropriately. But we also have to be sensitive and cognizant of the mental health component if that's something that we identify, keeping in mind that we're not clinicians, right? And not, we're pretty good, but understanding that we're not going to be able to diagnose someone. We might be able to have some sort of an idea, or maybe we've had previous experience with this person and we know a little bit of their history. But so yeah, there's a delicate balance there for sure. So we're going to address the criminal behavior as appropriate, but then it, oftentimes the mental health component comes in later.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee, for sharing. And John, I know your line of work, so I'm gonna let you jump the line. I think you had something to add.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Lee, for addressing the concern. And as a parent, I have to look out for my daughter, make sure the safety is all there. But I want to say in terms of support, in terms of what Jamie was saying, the Commander Madonna was saying, is a delicate balance. I think the resources is needed in terms of creating more mental health response team. The sheriff department partners up with Lifeboat Northwest to create this team, and they only have four clinicians that take care of the whole county 7 days a week, and they only operate from 11:30 in the morning to 11:30 at night. And so adding more resources and partnering with our adjacent counties, or not counties, but cities, I think is a great idea. And I'm hoping that you can expand this work into the south area of Washington County. It's interesting in terms of you're gonna have challenges when you work with folks who have mental health challenges, and so we just have to find the right balance and get the resources to the individuals so that they can get better. I think when you look into the myth of mental health, individual who has mental health challenges, is that more likely that people who have mental health challenges are victims of a criminal crime than the perpetrator. And I think in terms of when you look into the response of and the work that MHRT, Mental Health Response Team, does, is that they're dealing with in terms of just low mental health concerns, or someone had a bad day and they're working with that. And so they don't want to create a system where they're putting them in jail and bottlenecking the system and the justice system and so forth like that. And so partnering up with a clinician and be able to work with the individual, getting the resources to the individual, whether it is a crisis team, whether it is a mental health provider that can help support them after hours, whatnot like that. I think that's the goal of what MHRT wants to do, and also as a goal as the new narrative as an agency that provide mental health services to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And just to call attention, we are at 6:06. We had a couple more questions coming up, but I think we're going to end it after these two, and we'll obviously continue this conversation going forward. So Sean?
Thank you. I just wanted to tag on to Lee's comments, because as a parent, as a dad of two, I absolutely share his concern. I've personally seen things like that too with the drive-bys. You know, we're in a house over by Murray Woodward, and you know, we get reports when there are attempted abductions, and we watch the news, and I mean, we're a town of a little over 50,000, and there's something like, we've been hovering 21 to 22,000 calls for service. And sitting here, I have no idea how much of these are attempted attacks on our kids, and how much of that's successful, how much of that is stopped. I have no idea, but I have to say I find it really worrisome. And you know, as someone that's lived in Tigard for, you know, a number of years, this is kind of new in the last couple of years from my exposure. And, you know, I have to tell you, it definitely is piqued my interest, and, you know, it has my wife and I thinking about some things, you know, as far as our long-term plans here. So anyways, I just want to add on to Lee's comments, and I don't know what role this advisory board has in any of that, but I did want to share that.
Thank you for sharing, Sean. And Jimmy, this will be our last comment for this part of our agenda.
Okay, thank you. Before we move into our next phase, because, you know, part of our opportunities when we have the commander here as part of the group is to further discuss those elements that connect with hiring processes and the department and the work that the department is doing. But before we move to that, I just want to say thank you to all the board members for your comments. Lee and Sean, Justin, Valerie, the whole discussion about the importance of mental health services and and how we view the role that police officers have in being first responders in a mental health crisis. And is that the best use of those type of services? I don't think we're weighing in on an either or, but I do think we are weighing in on wanting to have more discussion about that. And I think that that's the role that the PSAB should have, is weighing in on that discussion and then moving forward if we have recommendations that should go forward to the chief and or to city council. And with that, one of the pieces that I believe we talked about early on as we were moving toward building an agenda for the PSAB was, what are the traits that we would look for relative to a potential Tigard police officer? And recognizing we had some discussion about that early on, since those earlier discussions, has that evolved, given what we have talked about within the PSAB meetings, given what we've seen happening in the community at large amongst our friendship group or our professional associations. And so I'd like us to have a bit of discussion about that. I think we can have a robust discussion, and I'm sure it's probably going to lead into the police officer hiring discussion. So we may just continue with that too as well, Commander McDonald. So I open it up to members of the group.
Yep. Thank you, Jimmy. And just to clarify, I know we talked about this at the beginning of last meeting with our breakout rooms, but this is really to get us back into that space of thinking about hiring and training police officers. And Lee, I see your hand.
Hey, it's the same thing as before. We talked about this a little bit, and but it's somebody, again, that I think what I'd like an officer to be is what I have seen. Like I said before, I think the Tigard Police Department is awesome. Every single time I talk to them, it's like I'm talking to a homeboy or a homegirl. We're talking about lots of other stuff besides police and everything else. They're human beings. But anyway, and the ride-alongs that I've been involved in, lots of them, the attitude of being loose going into the situation, kind of like, hey, what's happening? What's going on? This loose, and not come with this thick neck drill sergeant. Hey, how are you doing? You know what I'm saying? It's just somebody who's loose and cool, but that can also flip that light switch real fast when need be. Not too cool to where you ignore the important part of what your job is, but has that nice even cue and can display that they could do both with no problem.
Thank you for sharing, Lee. Would anyone else like to discuss what they look for in a police officer and maybe how that's even evolved over the last few years? Valerie.
So, I stand by my statement before when this question was asked. I think the number one thing that I would hope that a Tigard police officer would have would be judgment. Of course, it's the most difficult thing to hire for, right? And secondarily, I think it's important that, they have cultural competencies in the communities that are here, right? And so a domestic situation in one community may present very differently from a domestic situation in another community that a police officer may get called out to, and so the response needs to be scaled appropriately, right? And so I would hope that we are empowering, it's not so much a hiring issue as a training issue, but I would hope that and I guess this gets to something that Officer Nunn had said in our group, which is that one of the most important things for a police officer is the ability to learn and the willingness to learn, and teachability. So, so I think, you hire people who are smart, who have open mind, who are willing to be trained appropriately, and then you give them the appropriate tools through training to respond to the situations that they encounter. But you know, I think I stand by my initial statement, though, that I think judgment, because the ability, what are you going to do when you get dropped into a situation, I think is what I'm most concerned about. And I think, you know, this committee was constituted to address a situation where someone lacked judgment and where the training was not, you know, did not change their lack of judgment. So, you know, so that's my response to that question.
Thank you, Valerie. And Commander.
So this response is from me as a community member and not as a law enforcement professional. When I think of a police officer, because I spend a lot of time at work, if my family were to call for help, I would want that person that's responding to take care of my family the exact same way that I would. And when I am looking for a police officer, I guess now I'm putting on my commander hat, I'm looking for people that would care for the community or care for my family in the same way that I would. And that have that lens of being able to have that care and compassion, because that's really what our community, that's what this Tigard community is looking for, at least from what I've heard. They want people that are caring and compassionate, that are wise, that are able to have a smile, like Lee said, and maybe joke with you a little bit, lighten the situation if it's tense. I look for things like that, and those are valuable to me. If I'm looking for, if I can't be there to help my family or protect my family, I want somebody that's going to do it in the same way that I would. That's what I'm looking for.
Thank you, Commander. And I think that's a good segue into your part 2, police hiring, which you can talk a little bit about, but really it's to address some questions that came up last time and the Commander wasn't able to join us, and he watched the video and is going to go into a little more detail, I believe.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. In fact, I watched the video after Neil and Brandy came, and they did a great job. I mean, they hit a lot of great parts, but I also wrote feverishly notes and questions that I had after they were done. I'm like, oh, I want to know the answer to this. And then actually Justin asked a question to Brandy, and it was about some statistics around like test scoring favoring certain groups. And she hasn't gotten anything back from our test vendor yet. So we're still waiting for that, Justin. So I did follow up on that. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Bear with me here. Where is it? Hold on. I'm sorry. You guys will get to know that I'm not great at this. Where is it?
But we practiced.
I know, darn it. And now I can't find the right screen. Okay, hold on. Share screen. Where is my PowerPoint? Oh, for crying out loud. It's probably because we weren't actually in the meeting yet. Bear with me. Bear with me. I can do this. I have to close some of these other things out real quick, and I think that'll help me. I'm totally turning red right now, aren't I?
Just a little bit.
I should be. Okay.
Just so you know, Commander McDonald, everyone is smiling.
Well, good, because I'm like totally stressed out that I can't figure out why I can't find my darn.
In the ages of Zoom, we have all had the time where we couldn't find whatever thing we were trying to share. Yep, everybody is nodding.
Amen. It's not a normal workday unless I forget to unmute myself or mess up in Zoom somehow. So you're all good.
So I have this open now. And I think. Oh gosh. Okay, hold on.
You can also forward it to me and I can share it.
I'm going to get this right. Hang on. You know what I need to do? I'm moving my screens to the other screen, and that's where my problem is. Did I do it?
You did.
I did it. Okay. All right. My apologies to everyone. Darn it. I thought I had this figured out. Okay. So we're going to go through just a few things here. Let me click to the next one. So in the homework, I guess, Eduardo sent out some stuff on the statute surrounding social media research and the limitations around what we can do. And so that statute, the Oregon law tells us some stuff very specifically we can't do, which is request a password from someone to view their social media. However, I'll go ahead and talk about this right now because I think it's pertinent. It doesn't preclude a background investigator from doing an open source search, which they do on every applicant. And in the not so distant past, our background investigator, right before he met with an applicant, went on and looked at their social media profiles that were open source and identified that they had two different names, or I guess aliases, on one of the platforms. And in one of them, the alternate one, he saw the applicant actually committing a crime. A photo of, like, that was their, like, I guess their profile photo. They were tagging a guardrail with spray paint. And so, of course, the background investigator asked about it, and then they denied it, which, I mean, them committing the crime is probably enough to disqualify them from the background anyway. But then when they lied about it, that was for sure a no-go. And then he checked it again after the applicant left about 15 minutes later after the interview. And of course, the profile was gone, but he had taken some screenshots of it to add to the background packet, and it didn't go further anymore. But that was just open source. So we still do that. We look for open source information as well. And then screening for cultural competency is something we're going to talk about a little bit. Talk about our foreign language speakers. That was one of the things that we should have hit on last time, and we didn't. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the new hires that we've gotten since Chief McAlpine has been here, because I think it's pretty impressive, the hiring that we've done, the cross section of people, experience, and diversity that we've hired in that time. And then we're going to talk a little bit about background screening and psychological evaluation specific to bias and extremism, to kind of hit a little bit of that type of stuff. Okay, so here's an actual example of an oral board question. So if an applicant happens to be watching a PSAB meeting, they may or may not get here's a freebie potentially. So this is a question that we would ask. Some members of ethnic minority groups believe the criminal justice system treats them unfairly or with bias based solely on who they are. Why do you think they feel that way? Now, I have a question for the board members. How would you respond to that? How would you answer that question? And it isn't rhetorical. If you want to try and answer it, go right ahead, and I'd be happy to try and score you 1 to 10. Because I can tell you what a well-developed answer says to us in this. We hear someone who understands that there has been cultural bias in this country, that there is systemic racism, that the criminal justice system is or has had roots in racism. We hear that people say that it may treat them unfairly because they have been unfairly treated in the criminal justice system. Those are the types of things we're looking for. Maybe somebody says, well, you know, the history of policing in this country goes back over 400 years, and it started with slave patrols in Charleston, South Carolina. That would be a very well-developed answer. Somebody that can walk us through that type of history. So you're welcome if you're an applicant and you're getting the answer to this. But those are the types of things that we look for. Now, Brandy talked about how we have to have at least one like cultural competency question on any process in the city actually now. And we've worked with HR specifically for police focused questions. They have a whole battery of them you can choose from citywide, but we've worked with them specifically to talk about police focused ones. And generally there's going to be 2 of them in each oral board that you'll go to. And then if you're so lucky as to make it to the chief's interview, the chief asks some very pointed questions in the chief's interview. And this is right before a conditional offer of employment. The chief asks very specifically things like, what do you think about current events right now? And I tell you what, if you're not keeping up on current events, you're going to be caught flat-footed. And I've seen her let people walk out of the room because they couldn't tell her what was going on or articulate what the impact of current events are on our community. And meaning let them walk out of the room saying, you might not be ready and you might not fit the values that we're looking for, our core values of attitude, leadership, integrity, service, and teamwork. If you can't identify current events and how those might be impacting the community, your service to the community might not be what we're looking for. So as an example, but this is a good one here. I like this one because it forces an applicant to think on their feet. It forces them to be a deep thinker. And those, quite honestly, that have a broader understanding of society, of cultural awareness, they score better. You don't have to be a criminal justice major in order to nail this question. You don't have to know that the history of policing is what I said it was, but you have to be able to be a deep thinker and understand that this stuff, yeah, this is real. So
thank
yes.
you, Commander. And we have a couple hands. So, yep.
Yeah.
Jeff, go ahead.
Thanks. I had the pleasure of sitting on an oral board. I think it was toward the beginning of the month. And this one was great to be on there. And I think you're spot on. It requires people to be deep thinkers, to be aware of current events and how it affects Tigard. To a certain extent, it also requires these applicants to be courageous, because if they're answering it the way, you know, Tigard and Tigard PD is looking for them to answer, they have to potentially go against, you know, the thin blue line and kind of maybe how they think police officers would want them to respond. So this was a super interesting one, and I was glad to be a part of the interview panel.
Thank you, Jeff. And Valerie.
So yeah, just to reiterate what Jeff said, I'd encourage anybody who hasn't had an opportunity to serve on one of the oral boards to do it, because it is a really interesting, enlightening experience. My question, Commander, with respect to this type of question, though, is that, you know, I sat on a board, and it's basically a mathematical process, right? You ask the candidates the same questions, and then you average the answers that you get from the reviewers and get to a number. So do you have people who bomb these questions make it through the process? I mean, that's, I guess, my concern, since it comes down to a certain amount of just basic math, right?
Yeah, well, to a degree, they could potentially make it through. But generally, if they bomb like one question like this, they're not going to get a bunch of them in that. And there's a pretty good chance that if you can't answer this question, that there's some issues that might pop up in the psychological evaluation. And you could be, there's so many, it's like running the gauntlet, right? To try and get through a police hiring process. So oftentimes, and I've got actually, I'm going to read some stuff from our psychologist on an initial, like it's called a pre-suitability, where we send that to our doctor when the applicants come in, and then they evaluate them from the beginning, and then it gives our background investigators a baseline of things to look for. So if there's something where they're like, yeah, you might want to focus on, and I'll just look at it right now. Like on this one, some of the unfavorable indicators were problem solving and decision making. Big one in law enforcement. That's an unfavorable indicator. So we're looking at that going, okay, control of conflict, reliability, relations with other coworkers and citizens, unethical behavior, dishonesty. I mean, I'll go ahead and stop there. But those are some of the things that they noted in some of their standardized testing. These are scientifically proven tests that they have gone through, and the psychologist evaluates those, sends them back to us. And those are some things that then the background investigators can use as they're going through and say, okay, these are some red flag areas. You should probably focus on these and pay attention to areas that of concern in these areas. Mm-hmm. And then if they make it through a background without being disqualified, then that's the psychologist then gets the full background to read through. They're the ones that administered, or I shouldn't say administered, they're the ones that evaluated that pre-suitability questionnaire. They then get an opportunity to sit down and actually fully interview the applicant, and then they can give a seal of approval or not based on what they see in that psychological evaluation. So it's comprehensive. And so they're looking for a lot of specifics. One of the things, and I had a conversation with our psychologist today, and she sent me a few things. They talk about, one of the things I wanted to mention was talking about bias and extremism and looking for that in backgrounds. Now, our background investigators do that type of thing. I mean, they'll go to a neighbor and ask the neighbor, hey, what's McDonald like, that, your next door neighbor, you know anything about him? And, you hear what a neighbor has to say, because you can tell a lot about a person by how they interact with their neighbors, right? Yeah. Because your family members are probably going to say, oh, he's a great guy. He's going to be a great police officer. He's wanted to be a cop since he was 6 years old. He's always worn a short haircut. Not that I could wear a long haircut now, but, it's that type of stuff. So we ask things about that. So she said, one of the things that they assess for is they're looking for bias in terms of like jokes that they might tell about people of another race, sexist jokes, other inappropriate jokes, simple things like that. They're looking for in a psychological evaluation that may lead them to think that there is some sort of something that they need to dig in a little deeper on. And so that's what the psychologist is looking for. And so they'll look for those simple little things, and then they can dig in deeper. And she even says, she goes, we look into further inquiry into this area, depending on the answers. And so when they start to get those answers back, and those are all part of those pre-suitability tests. And so if they answer certain things that psychologists have evaluated and proven with over and over, then it gives the psychologist something to be able to look into and maybe dig a little deeper. So there's a little method to the madness. And then she said that they're really working on a formalized test into racial bias. And I won't profess to understand the science behind it, but she said apparently it's really difficult to get a highly accurate one for racial bias. I don't know why. She didn't go into the details of it, but apparently there's one out now that she feels is pretty solid, and they're actually going to implement that here in the coming months. She said it's pretty new. It's only been out about what did she say? She didn't write it down. I want to say she said it's only been out since like the first of the year. So anyhow, it's constantly evolving, but that's one of the things we do with backgrounds is the pre-suitability is used for the background, which also then is used when the doctors evaluate if a person makes it through the background. So you're being evaluated like on similar things multiple times throughout the process, so that chances of you getting through when you're maybe not suitable for what Tigard is looking for become very, very slim at every turn.
Thank you, Commander. I really appreciate that answer.
There are no other hands right now, Commander.
Okay, great. We'll move on to the next slide. This next one, I wanted to hit the different speakers of our foreign language speakers we have. And I'm not 100% sure that the Spanish is accurate. I think it's a few more, but I don't think they've all tested and gotten, because you have to test annually to make sure that you have proficiency. And I think some of them haven't tested because maybe they didn't brush up on their Spanish enough to pass the test. Because I know that number has been higher and we haven't lost Spanish speakers. We haven't lost that many Spanish speakers. So that would just be the ones that have passed the proficiency test. We have one officer, you'll see her in a couple minutes, who speaks Bosnian, Croatian, German, Russian, and English. And then one that speaks Korean, one that speaks Laotian. So, I mean, I have a hard enough time with English, let alone with 5 languages. And yeah, it's pretty impressive that what she does. So I'm going to show you some of the folks that we've hired and a little bit of story behind them. These are all the hires that have happened since Chief McAlpine got here in April of 17. So this is going left to right. That's Jordan, Shane, and Clay. So Shane is actually, the middle one is one of our canine officers. Now he and his dog have only been certified a few months. Clay on the right, born and raised in Tigard, graduated from Tigard High School, was one of our cadets and was our 2nd or 3rd cadet to become a police officer, which is pretty cool to see some of our young people grow up and become police officers. On the left there, that's Anella. She's the one that speaks all those languages. She's a lateral. Actually, all 3 of these women on this page worked for another agency and came to us. So that's a pretty good testament to Chief McAlpine, is all of a sudden we start seeing a lot of people that work at other agencies want to come to work for us. So Anella came to us from Mount Angel. She speaks a bunch of languages. CJ, Cindy Jo Bunyavath, she's actually speaks Laotian. She's the one that speaks Laotian. And she came to us from Beaverton, and then Shelby came to us from King City. And actually she was at Hillsborough at one point too, and a business owner. So she comes to us with a ton of life experience as well. These gentlemen here are all a variety of different people. So Spencer there on the left is full fluent in Spanish. He spent a couple of years as a guide working in Central America and in Spain, and was speaking Spanish, not doing it for like American tourists there. He was actually there speaking the language for people that lived there. So
he has a degree in Spanish.
Yeah, degree in Spanish. So he's fluent. Thanks, Nick, for reminding me. And then Victor and why am I forgetting his name? Come on, Nick, help me out.
Kevin Henderson.
Thank you. Kyle.
Kyle.
Yeah. I know we hire so many people, I forget who they all are. And I don't see them all that often because these are all in patrol and I don't work in patrol. Erica came to us from Hawaii. She she has a boatload of life experience as well. She was a bartender for several years and then came to us from Hawaii. She's a DRE, one of our very few DREs, which is a drug recognition expert to help with people that are driving under the influence of drugs. And then Michael is, he comes from actually a big family. He was in the Marine Corps. He's the one in the middle there. He's younger, not tons of life experience, but very wise for his age. And then Michael, again, on the right, is actually a lateral from an agency in California. Comes to us with about 6 or 7 years of experience from an agency in California. And then these 3, Chino Pompelli there on the left, he is brand new to law enforcement, but spent about 20-ish years working in business out in the community. And then Jose came to us from the juvenile department out of Marion County. And then the gentleman on the right there, Chris, he's a Portland retiree. He started with us in January, and he's got more experience probably than everyone else you've seen here combined. He's got 27 years with the Portland Police Bureau, retired, and came to work with us.
17 years as a detective.
Yeah, 19 years as a detective at Portland. The 2 gentlemen on the left retire. They don't retire. They graduate from the police academy this Thursday. So they will be coming back home and you'll be starting to see them around town. And then Diane, she is at the police academy and she was a barista directly before she came to work for us. And she's a soccer player too. So I'm excited to kick the ball around with her a little bit. And we have, and the 2 open ones are the 2 other officers that we have job offers out to. Mark Scott and Mitchell Chung, who start next Monday, actually, is when they both start. Here's some of our non-sworn staff. That's Stephanie. She's our our community engagement program specialist. I knew I'd get it right. That's Kevin, one of our background investigators. And then Pastor Dorothy, she's one of our chaplains. And then Thea is a record specialist. Kelsey's is our PIO. And then that's Brenda, one of our background investigators as well. And then this is Jim, also a background investigator. And our background investigators are all retired, mainly detectives or investigators from their agencies. And so they really know how to do investigations and do a great job with that. And then the two open spots there, we have two non-sworn spots that we're trying to hire, which is another record specialist and a property and evidence specialist. We talked a little bit about background checks. So I talked a little bit about the investigators. And so while they're investigators, they also get special background investigator training that trains them in some of those specific areas that we're looking for. We really want to, like I said in the bottom statement there, the entire process is designed to find the best applicants possible, those that reflect the values of the community and the organization. That's what we're looking for. When we are doing this, the entire process is designed to do that. If we find people that don't meet those values, and the values are attitude, leadership, integrity, service, and teamwork, if you don't meet those, there's a good chance that you're not going to make it through our process, because at some point in the process, we're going to find things that just don't match up. We're methodical. We owe it to the community to hire the very best people that we can. And we recruit the very best that we can. We go, in terms of recruiting, we go to job fairs. The state at the police academy, they host a job fair annually, outside of COVID. We've done the Women in Trades job fair, which is in North Portland, and puts us in front of a variety of different, it's a variety of different trades, but it puts us in front of women, which Brandy talked about it last week. We have 20% sworn are women in our agency, which is unbelievable. I was talking with the deputy chief at Bend today, and I kind of got a little plug in because we were talking about recruiting, and he made a comment about their recruiting. And I said, oh yeah, I found an interesting statistic last week. And so I told him what our female to male ratio was, and he was blown away. And he's like, wow, I thought we were doing great. And that's way better than us. So I took that as kind of a compliment. And part of that is because of our chief. She has been such a huge factor in this recruiting push, in addition to HR. HR has put a lot of focus on recruiting in more focused areas. And that has gotten us better with getting a more diverse pool of candidates through the door and getting us an opportunity to see those people and identify whether or not they meet the values of this community. And when we get the right people in the door, then we find those people that are the right people for the community. So I'm going to not talk. I'm guessing we probably have questions.
We do. Good call. Okay. Justin, go ahead.
Thank you. And I didn't even realize it's the question portion, so perfect timing. Thank you for that presentation, Commander McDonald. I realized just based off of what you presented right there that you all already make a very concerted effort to recruit from diverse backgrounds and to also do your due diligence in the tests and investigations. I would like to ask this for the record, because as we've been having this conversation, I realized that it sounds like the doctors, psychologists, and investigators play a really huge role in terms of gatekeeping for the applicants that come in and that actually make it to the following rounds. And so I was curious if your background investigators, psychologists, and doctors get vetted as well, in terms of their own racial bias or cultural bias, and any other forms of discrimination that might come up, since they are the gatekeepers of your application process?
Yeah, excellent question, Justin. And yes, the answer is yes, absolutely. So all of our background investigators go through actually, I shouldn't say the exact same. They go through an even higher level of scrutiny when we do their backgrounds. So we actually will hand those to most of the time it goes to a detective sergeant. So one of our supervisors to vet those and to evaluate the background investigators. And so we actually go into a deeper level of evaluation. And the great thing about that is, and I think you heard this last week, when we evaluate lateral applicants, we are incredibly highly scrutinizing those people, because chances are, I mean, it isn't ringing true right now because we have a great chief and everybody wants to come and work for her. So laterals oftentimes are running from something. And so what we do is we evaluate those background investigators. We go back and we'll look at their career, and we want to understand, okay, what were they like during their career? Were there any things as a police officer that they saw? And then we do all the other background stuff that we do for an applicant as well. So we do go deep into that, and we're looking specifically for those types of things. We want to make sure that there isn't somebody that's going to inject their personal bias into a process, because it would be very easy to do, right? We have a specific way we have it set up in the department so that the recruiting and initial interview process is done on one side of the house. I don't even see those people until a background gets to my desk. And that's by design, because then I can't inject any bias at any point into the process. So I don't even know what that person looks like when the background gets to my desk, right? So I can go through and I can evaluate that background, and I won't be allowed to, hey, this is my buddy, try and run them through the process, right? That's going to be handled in the other division in the department. And then it gets handed over for backgrounds to the other side. And internally, if you have some sort of a conflict, if there's a conflict of interest, if you know an applicant, for example, I know an applicant that will be coming through, I hope is going to be coming through the process, I won't allow myself to be a part of that decision-making process. So I'll remove myself from that part of it. Even though I have no doubt that this person's going to be fantastic and that they'll be an excellent addition to the organization, I'll remove myself from the process so that there can be no chance for me to be able to say that, hey, yeah, this person, or that anyone else could say, oh, this person got hired because they know you, right? So that's an example of how we try to make sure that we keep bias out of the process as much as possible. I have bias for that applicant because I think that he'll be a fantastic addition to the organization, right? So I wouldn't want to overlook something that maybe shouldn't be or wouldn't fit with our values, right? But with background investigators, we're very methodical about it to make sure that they're meeting what our expectations are, and that there's no bias there. And that's part of the training that they go to. When they're in that training, they are actually training the background investigators to identify personal bias so that they can check themselves and make sure that they're not injecting any bias into their decision-making process.
Thank you. I figured there's a process, but I really appreciated hearing how rigorous it actually is.
No problem.
Thank you for your question and the answer, Commander. And Jimmy, I see your hand.
Thank you. Commander, thank you so much for the presentation. It was in-depth, and, again, just to be able to look at the journey that a police officer has coming into Tigard. So I have a couple of questions. One relates to psych evals. So we do a psych eval in the hiring process. And that obviously is set up to, not necessarily weed people out, but it probably does in some cases, and keeps others in. I'd like to know, given the stress that police officers face during their job and the different scenarios that they have to come up on, do we provide psych evals for officers that have been in the department 3, 4, 5 years after hire? If not, why not? Is it a union? Is it a labor issue? Is it something that we might find of value? Because the sense is that the police officer's job being very stressful, where a person might be in 2021, they may have changed somewhat, say in 4 years or 5 years down the road. So that's the first question. And then the second question relates to, we have a really good percentage of women who are on our police force. I think the number is like 6% for the state, but we're at 20%. How does that look when we go into command structure? Again, I know that Tigard isn't the largest department out there, but if we have 20% of our workforce as patrol officers, what does it look like when we start climbing the management ladder?
Yeah, so I'll hit the first one first. And so in terms of, do we require a psych eval after officers have been on the job? No. There is not a requirement, and my guess is that the union would probably would take exception. There may even be something legally, and I won't begin to know whether or not there is. What I can say is that there is a growing number of police agencies across the country, but more specifically in Oregon, that make like a mental health clinician available to their staff. So, here at the city of Tigard, we have the EAP, which many employers provide to their employees. So our staff can do that as well. And then after critical incidents, we, under certain circumstances, we provide the opportunity for officers to go talk to a psychologist and to make sure that they're ready to come back to work after a critical incident, because the things that police officers see are not normal. Right. The amount of emotional trauma that they deal with is significant. So, there are actually some agencies that have contracts where they have, mental health clinicians or therapists that come into their facility and they make themselves available. And if they aren't equipped to talk to somebody about a specific challenge or issue that they have, then they have the ability to make referrals. So it's a growing, I should say, trend that I think is fantastic, because one of the hard things is in law enforcement, you need to normalize that. You need to normalize that it's okay to, I call it, and this is one of the things we talk about with our peer support team. We have a peer support team that can talk to people about things like that here within the department. They have specialized training. And if you've had something that's rough that's happened, you can go talk to a member of the peer support team. Peer support team then also has additional resources that they can provide to an officer. So there is a support network there. And when I talk to our peer support team members, I call it a checkup from the neck up, right? And there's a lot to that. People generally go see their doctor. Yeah, my ankle's been bothering me, doc, or my knee's out of whack. Can you help me? And, hey, doc, I haven't been sleeping very well, and I keep having this recurring dream. That might be time to go talk to somebody professionally and see if you can get some stuff sorted out. So we do have resources that we provide to our officers. I'll be perfectly honest, it's not as robust as I'd like it to be. But that's Jamie speaking, right? I think that law enforcement as a profession has room to grow in that area. I think we have room to grow. So your second question, Jimmy, about women in our command structure. So currently it is just the chief. We had a sergeant. She decided to pursue another agency and some opportunities there. And so currently it is just the chief that's a female in our command structure. And I think that the important part about that is that we have to have movement in our leadership. Sergeants, we've got most of our sergeants have been around for quite a while, right? So we're going to start seeing some of that movement. And so that's one of the things that we're constantly working on, is that succession planning, trying to get different people into different positions, get them the experience that they need. Right now, of the, 8 detectives we have, 3 of them are women. of the 8, 2 of them are people of color. So, you know, I would consider those department leadership positions, right? And so you start to see, when you start getting those positions, then you start preparing those people for leadership positions too. So, yeah, we have room to grow there too.
And Jamie, I think it's important when you talk about leadership in our department that we don't get promoted just based solely off recommendations or something. There's a whole different testing process to get promoted. So somebody has to want to get promoted and actually go through the testing process to get promoted.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Nick. And it's one of the things, the promotional process for sergeant or lieutenant is it's rigorous, and it should be. We have a high expectation of our first line supervisors. The vast majority of time, they are the only ones out on the street between 5 p.m. and probably 7 a.m. most days, and then all weekend. And then Sean, I wanted to hit one thing real quick because I know we're getting close to the end. You made a observation about like abductions and things like that. It's very, very rare that we even have an attempted one. So rare that it scares us. Just so you know, when those types of things happen, and when those types of even things like what Lee said, when those happen, those are the types of things that give us pits in our stomachs. And that really, that makes us, and it's okay. I'll tell you, I've been scared many times in my job. I hear a call like that come out, an attempted abduction, and it scares me. That's how rare they are in this job. Especially here in Tigard. I could probably count on one hand the number of times in the 20 years I've been on the job that I've seen or I've had one of those calls. So it is incredibly rare, and it scares even us. And we see some pretty crazy stuff. So anyway, I wanted to circle back on that because I think it was an important point to hit.
Thank you. That's very reassuring. We see so much crazy stuff on the news, but I mean, at the same time, we do have to remember we have a population of 330 million as a country. That's nearly the size of continental Western Europe. Or no, we're bigger than that.
Yeah,
so it's something I try to remember.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Commander, for following up on so many questions that came up during last meeting. Thank you, everybody here, for our really thoughtful discussion. I'm just going to go quickly into next steps, Jimmy, if that's all right.
Yes, please do. Thank you.
Thanks. So as we're all aware, there's kind of 2 parts to these discussions. One is kind of the education purpose. The police department gets to come in and tell you about their processes, what they're currently doing. And then we have the second half where you all take that information, funnel it through your experiences, what you hear from the community, and come back and offer recommendations to the group. I'm just going to share real quick the work plan that we had. These are the topics. These are not the only topics that you are allowed to make recommendations on, but some things that I think would be important to consider over the next 2 weeks. So if you wouldn't mind going back to the work plan, looking over some of these topics, thinking if there's anything that you would like to offer as a recommendation or bring to the group for discussion next meeting. And we'll come back to police hiring. Any questions on that? Wonderful. Over to you, Jimmy.
All righty. I want to thank everyone for their participation this evening. You know, I'm always struck by the robust discussion that we have as a group, and how authentic it is, how open and honest those discussions are. The fact that we can bring, I think, really sensitive information to the group. I go back to Lee's discussion. I go to Sean's discussion. You know, these are items that are personal. They are heartfelt. They are part of someone's lived experience, and to be able to bring us into those pieces of their lives really honors this process. And I feel honored to be able to listen and accept the words that they've given us. that being said, I would like to call for a motion to adjourn the meeting tonight. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
I motion.
And do we have a second?
I second. I third again.
Okay. We've had our motion and we've had our second from members. And with that, I would like to again thank all of you. Thank the community for those who have tuned in to watch our presentation tonight. We will be back again in 2 weeks to move forward with the information that Kim presented us as part of our next steps. And with that, signing off, and everyone have a great evening.
Good evening, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.